Hi, welcome to the Ascension McKinney podcast. I'm Pastor Seth Williamson, the lead pastor and church planner for Church of the Ascension here in McKinney, Texas. Our podcast is all about the life of the church here in McKinney, Texas, and how you can follow Christ more nearly. And our mission is to bring all people into the fullness of life through relationship with Jesus Christ. Make sure to like and comment on this video and share it with your friends. We're continuing our study through the book of Mark today, and we're going to be looking at Mark chapter 4, verses 35 through 520, talking all about fear. It can be scary to follow Jesus sometimes because there are real threats in the world. What do we do when we come across real threats in the world? Well, that's what we're talking about today. So stay tuned. Hope you enjoy this episode. When I was a little kid, believe it or not, I actually had horrible stage fright. I would not get on the stage in my preschool graduation, although, looking back, it is a little silly to put on a cap and gown when you're in preschool and prance across the stage, but there's no way you're getting me up there. And I grew up Baptist, and so when I accepted Christ as my Savior, the next thing supposed to happen was I was supposed to get baptized. And I was terrified of getting up in front of the thousands of people at my church and getting dunked under the water. And so my stage fright was really preventing me from doing a lot of the things that I wanted to do and that I knew God wanted me to do. And so I prayed to God and I asked him, said, Lord, I want to get baptized. Would you please help me be brave enough to do it? And God answered that prayer, and my stage fright sort of went away. Now, I never became a person who was seeking attention, all right? I never became sort of the person that wanted to be an entertainer or an actor. But when God lifted that stage fright that allowed me to go and get baptized, it also prepared the way for me to become a preacher. See, God knew what he was doing in answering that prayer and giving me that courage. Now, stage fright, it's one of the most common fears there are in the world, but it's not really anything that dangerous. Like, you're not going to die from going on stage. But the fact of the matter is this: there are real fears, real concerns that disciples face. Look, I want to affirm the fact that you might be scared. You might be afraid to follow the voice of Jesus, to follow him on this journey of discipleship. And that's real. We're not going to pretend like these things aren't real. We're going to stare down the things we're afraid of and accept that they're scary. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think you want to be afraid of these things. I'm sure you want to follow Jesus, and you are upset that your fear is preventing you from doing so. So as we look at this passage in Mark today, we're going to be answering this question: how can you fearlessly follow God? If you have a Bible, you can follow along with me in Mark chapter 4, beginning at verse 35, and we'll be going all the way down to chapter 5, verse 20. We'll talk about three things today. We'll start by talking about evil's power. Then we'll talk about Jesus's power, and we'll finish by talking about how to begin to be fearless. So, evil's power. Powerful evil forces, both supernatural and natural, are capable of destroying the disciple. There are powerful forces out there, spiritual and natural, that are capable of destroying the disciple. Look at verses 35 through 38 with me. On that day, when evening had come, Jesus said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was, and other boats were with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so that the boat was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" And he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. He said to them, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, Who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him? Now, here's the thing you're going to notice over and over again as we go through this passage. The word fear, afraid, fear pops up over and over and over again. Clearly, the author, Mark, is trying to address the issue of fear, okay? And he uses an example of something that is a real fear. Storms when you're in a little wooden boat in the middle of a big sea. That's a legitimate fear. People drowned all the time in the sea back then. And for those of us who can't relate to that, just imagine the last time you were in an airplane with turbulence. We were probably safer up in the sky than we would be on the sea, but if we have a little bump going on in the plane, we're praying and we're terrified. This is a real fear. And the fact of the matter is, storms in those days were considered so unpredictable and uncontrollable. They didn't have the weather app. They couldn't just pull it up and see when the next storm was going to come. They just knew that at any moment, the sky could be blue and then it'll be gray and there'll be wind and waves and they could be done for. There was always a risk, a real risk to going across the sea. There are forces in this world, natural forces in this chaotic, broken world that can derail and destroy the disciple. And it's natural to be afraid of them. Think of tornadoes. I live out here in Texas. It's tornado country. We have tornadoes frequently. They usually are not very big. They usually don't go very far. But every now and then a tornado comes through our country that has some real damage. And recently in Rolling Fork, Mississippi, a tornado cut straight through town, killing 5 people and destroying hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of property. Now, that was unpredictable. There's no way to really know if a tornado is going to show up. And if it does show up, where's it going to go? All you do, I found out now living here, is you just track it on your phone. And if it's coming towards you, you go run for cover. You just change locations. All you can do. If your house just happens to be in the path of the tornado, there's not much you can do to stop it. And that's scary. I don't like that, right? It's a real fear that we have. God, what if, as I'm following Jesus, the forces of nature come and they destroy me? What then? That's a real concern to have. There, on top of natural forces, there are supernatural forces as well that are working against us, that threaten us. Look at chapter 5, verses 1 through 5, and verse 9. So they've crossed the sea, they've gotten through the storm. That's what it says, verses 1 through 5. They came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes. And when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. He lived among the tombs, and no one could bind him any more, not even with a chain. For he had often been bound with shackles and chains, but he wrenched the chains apart, and he broke the shackles in pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs, and on the mountains he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. And when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before him. And crying out with a loud voice, he said, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." For he was saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." So that was verses 1 through 9. So there was this demoniac, they call him, this demon-possessed man, who's not just possessed by one demon, but an entire legion of demons. That's hundreds of demons are inside this man. And he's terrorized this region. People have tried to tie him up, but he just breaks through the chains. He had this supernatural strength. He was cutting himself, and he was a terror to this region. No one could stop him. No one was powerful enough to stop him. Everyone was at his mercy. He was a demonic bully who was terrorizing this area, and he was so scary no one even dared to get near that area. This is a powerful force that is from out of this world that comes in and targets the disciple. We don't take that seriously always. I heard a story one time about some missionaries who went to Haiti on a mission trip. And they were driving through town, and they had this, their driver, tour guide, translator was an ex-Special Forces guy. Super tough, super big, super strong. He was there as their bodyguard, translator, tour guide, one-stop shop for everything. Well, as they're driving through town, the shaman comes up and writes something on the car. Now, the bodyguard gets out, goes out, and erases it from the car. And they get back in, and they go, what was that all about? He goes, oh, he just tried to put a curse on us. Now, hold on one second, right? From a purely materialistic frame of mind, you go, it's just some scribbles on the car. What does that mean? But this ex-Special Forces guy had been around Haiti long enough that he knew that there really were demonic forces afoot, and that he needed to take that seriously. This is some kind of joke. It wasn't a movie. It was real. He had seen people, even today in our modern world, attacked by the demonic. You know, it's easy to look on TV and see shootings and tornadoes, and you hear about crazy people. You hear about all these random acts of violence, and it's easy to feel vulnerable and afraid and want to hide. That might be your reaction. You might say, you know, I'll watch church on TV. I'll give my money over the internet, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm not taking any risks whatsoever. We wrap ourselves up in bubble wrap because we don't want to get hurt. Here's the deal. Those fears are rational because those demonic forces can overpower you. Those natural forces can overpower you. So what do? Here's the thing. Jesus can overpower those forces. Jesus is more powerful than any evil foe the Christian might face. Jesus is more powerful than any evil foe the Christian might face. We see Jesus display the peak of his power by doing what? By calming a storm. Look at verses 38 and 41 again. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion, and they woke him and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we're perishing? And he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said to them, Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith? And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? So an unpredictable, powerful natural force, which, by the way, we still cannot control. We can predict and track the weather. We can't control the weather, right? We can't stop a tornado. We can't stop a hurricane. We can't stop the wind. We can't stop the rain. But Jesus can with his voice. Jesus can use his voice to do something no one else can do. He can control the weather. Don't you think that Jesus might be working on your behalf to work out the weather for you? That if you're going on a mission trip or you're going here or going there, don't you think that God is always working to protect you until he's done with you in this life? And at that point, all we do is go up and rest with him in glory, awaiting the resurrection. See, Jesus rebuked the storm for trying to harm his disciples. He said, Bad storm. How dare you try and hurt my disciples? But then look what he does. He also turns around and rebukes his disciples and says, Why are you so afraid? Don't you believe in me yet? See, their faith should have overpowered their fear. Not through wishful thinking, not through manifesting their destiny, but because the object of their faith has the power to do all things. Jesus is not just able to overpower a single demon, but he can fight off an entire army of demons with just the sound of his voice. Look at chapter 5, verses 6 through 8. And when the demoniac saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before him, and crying out with a loud voice, he said, What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me. For he was saying to him, Come out of the man, you unclean spirit. In verses 12 through 13. And they begged, and the demons begged him, saying, Send us to the pigs, let us enter them. So he gave them permission, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs, and the herd, numbering about 2,000. And the herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea, and drowned in the sea. You know, the disciples didn't drown in the sea, but the demons did. The demons drowned in the sea. See, if Jesus wanted the disciples to drown in the sea, they would have drowned in the sea. But he didn't want them to drown in the sea. He protected them. The demons, on the other hand, did drown in the sea, and Jesus is the one who caused it to happen. With the simple sound of his voice, Jesus defeated an entire legion of demons. Now, people saw this. Again, everyone is terrified because now they realize there's someone even more powerful around. They thought they were afraid of the storm. They thought they were afraid of the demons. But this guy is even more powerful, which means he's probably even more terrifying. What is Jesus going to do to them if he can do all this? Everyone was afraid of him except for one. The only person who wasn't afraid of Jesus was the man who had been delivered from the demons. Look at this conversation between Jesus and the demoniac. Verses 18 through 20. And Jesus was getting into the boat. The man who had been possessed with demons begged him that he might be with him. And he did not permit him, but said to him, Go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you, and how he has had mercy on you. And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and everyone marveled. Now, this is a Gentile man. He wasn't a Jew. And so maybe that's why Jesus didn't want him to come back with him, because he was working amongst the Jews, and he wanted this man to go work amongst the Gentiles. Either way, this man had been saved by the power of Jesus. He had been tormented by these demons, but he realized that Jesus was a benevolent force, not an evil force. He was the powerful force for good. And so he wanted to be with him, but instead Jesus sent him out to do what? To proclaim the power of God. Think of that man's testimony. Everyone knew what had happened to him. Everyone knew how powerful those demons were. But now he gets to go and say, the Lord, Yahweh, the God of the Jews, has had mercy on me through his son Jesus and has delivered me. And suddenly, in this Greek city, they realize that there is a true God in heaven who is more powerful than all their gods, who is the only true God, and they would repent and believe in Jesus and be saved. So here's the thing. It's not just a mental assent to say, yeah, I believe Jesus can do this. But when you have experienced God's power, you have to go out and proclaim it to other people, testify about it, to cast away fear and bring people into life. So our faith should overpower our fear and cause us to go forth in bravery, proclaiming the power of God, because we are protected by the power of God. Now, we've talked about that, right? Jesus is more powerful than the forces of darkness in this world. But what does it mean to begin to follow God fearlessly? Well, this is going to sound maybe overly simplistic, but let me put it to you this way. I want you to pick something small that scares you and do it. Pick something small that scares you and do it. You know, when I was a kid, we were members of this pool, and we would go there, and like most pools, there was a deep end where you could dive. And when I was a little kid, I was a pretty good swimmer. But anytime I would get even close to the deep end of the pool, I would look at how deep it was, and I could feel in the pit of my stomach that it scared me, and I didn't want to get anywhere near it. And so my dad was always trying to coax me out and say, hey, let's go swim in the deep end. Let's go swim in the deep end. And I was like, I really don't want to do that, Dad. So finally one day my dad picks me up and throws me into the deep end. And I swim out of the deep end back to the shallow. Now, it was terrifying in the moment. But I knew that my dad was not going to let anything happen to me. And that sometimes my dad has to kind of force me to do things I'm afraid of. And after that point, I wasn't really ever afraid of the deep end again. Because my father had helped me overcome that fear. I'm not saying start by going to a remote jungle in Africa. But if leaving the country scares you, maybe sign up for a mission trip and go out of the country. Maybe you're afraid of meeting new people. Go sign up for a happy hour or networking event. Come to our interest meeting on May 25th and meet other Christians who want to live on mission. Maybe you're afraid of public speaking. Go and find an opportunity to talk about your story. Maybe you have alcoholics in your family. Go to an Al-Anon meeting and give your testimony there. Go to a Bible study and share your testimony. Whatever it may be, all I'm saying is pick something that scares you, bring it before the Lord, pray about it, and then walk forth in faith. And then here's the thing. That point forward, if you can do that little thing, maybe you can do something bigger, and then bigger, and then bigger. And you're growing and growing and growing. Your faith is beginning to grow, and you realize what God is doing for you. This will begin to cause you to experience the strength of God and know mentally, just like the demoniac, just like the disciples, that God can indeed protect you from these forces, that God is more powerful from these forces, and that if he allows you to drown in the sea, it's because that was the best thing for you in that moment. But if he delivers you through the storm, that was the best thing for you in that moment. You know, as you go about your mission for Jesus, you're going to face uncontrollable calamity, unpredictable disasters in your life. But you don't need to be afraid. Wherever you go, remember that God's power far exceeds all of these scary things in your life. Imagine if you lived a fearless life as a disciple. All the people you could influence, the places you'd go, the stories you'd have to tell. Maybe you'd inspire somebody else to step out of their comfort zone too. So I challenge you, pick something small that scares you and go out there and walk in faith and experience the power of God. I'm Pastor Seth Williamson. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Remember to subscribe, to like, to share, to follow, and leave a comment. We'll see you next week.